Hi, it's the Essential Business Writing Skills module on rewriting style. Remember, there is good writing style and bad writing style, and of course, we want to have good writing style. And what that basically means is we want our writing to be conversational. Remember, write the way you speak. We want to have good you attitude. We want to have proper paragraph and sentence length. And most of the time, we want to use the active voice as opposed to the passive voice. So let's take a look at those one at a time, starting with conversational style. Sometimes people will use stuffy, boring phrases because they think they're more businesslike. Don't use them. Write the way you speak. But you will see things like enclosed, please, find. No one ever speaks that way, and you shouldn't write that way either. Enclosed is. Or how about this one? Pursuant to your request. Pursuant to your. Have you ever said that in your life? Has your significant other asked you to take out the trash? You did so. You came back in and you said, pursuant to your request, I took out the trash. Of course, you've never said that. You always said, as you asked, I took out the trash. And that's what we should say here, as you asked. Or how about this one? The reader is kindly requested. That is so dated. As you asked is much, much, much better. Here's another style issue. You attitude. You want to write with the reader in mind. Always remember that. Write with the reader in mind. The reader doesn't care about you. The reader cares about himself or herself. And so you want to write with the reader in mind. You want to have that good you attitude. Let me show you a couple of examples. Here's an example of lacks you attitude. I have negotiated an agreement with National Rent-A-Car that gives you a discount on rental cars. Much better would be, as a University of Hawaii employee, you can now get a 20% discount when you rent a car from National Rental Car. Or how about this one? Lacks you attitude. We are shipping your order of September 20 this afternoon. Better, the 2 dozen coffee mugs you ordered will be shipped this afternoon and should reach you by September 27. Or how about this one? Lacks you attitude. You'll be happy to hear that Acme ladders meet OSHA requirements. You'll be happy to hear adds nothing. Just get rid of it. Acme ladders meet OSHA requirements. How about this? We provide health insurance to all employees. You receive health insurance as a full-time City and County of Honolulu employee. Generally, you want to use you attitude, which means putting you up front, but not all the time. Avoid you in negative situations. For example, lacks you attitude, you failed to sign your check. Why not just say your check was not signed? Here's another issue. Avoid you attitude when it pertains to all people. That's the third person and not just you, the second person. Let me give you an example of that. You cannot talk to the media about Bank of Hawaii matters without the express approval of the Director of Public Relations. It sounds like I'm singling that one person out, but that's not true for just that one person. That's true for everybody. So let's go ahead and make that third person. Remember, in order to keep a consistent message about the Bank of Hawaii in the media, all bank personnel must refrain from commenting about the bank with the media without the express approval of the Director of Public Relations. That's what we really want to do there in that situation. Go to that third person. Another style issue is paragraph length. And our targets for paragraphs come from what's often referred to as the Flesch-Kincaid readability scale. Without too much background, the Department of Defense wanted to come up with a better way to write so that their documents, their technical documents, were easier to read, and they got these two reading researchers, Flesch and Kincaid, to put together some programs, and ultimately what they came up with was these targets are best for making your reading easier. You want to average about 3 to 5 sentences per paragraph. You want to average about 15 to 17 words per sentence. You want to average about 4.5 characters per word. And the great news is Word will calculate those for you. And let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to jump out of PowerPoint here and jump over into Word. Now we want to use our tool over here, our review spelling and grammar. And it just says spelling and grammar check complete. You're good to go. Okay, I haven't turned on that tool, so let's go ahead and turn that on. If you don't see that, you want to turn it on, and here's how you do that. Go up into your options, and these are your proofing options. And down here, see where my cursor is jumping around right here, it says show readability statistics. That is not checked, and so what we want to do is check that, and then that will show us our readability statistics. One other thing, as long as I'm in here, I want to point out one other thing that you want to turn on is go into your writing style settings, and down here under style, notice none of these are turned on. You want to turn on this one that says passive sentences. Okay. The reason is that will then detect passive sentences, and in just a minute we'll get into why you want to do that. So I'm going to say okay. Now what I've done is I've turned, notice it put blue underneath there, that showed those passive sentences there. You know what, I'm going to turn that off because this is 4 pages long. I don't want to have to stop at each of those passive sentences. So let's go ahead and, just for timeliness, go ahead and turn that guy back off. Okay, now when I run spell check, it's going to go straight to everything's good to go. Spelling and grammar check complete, you're good to go. But now when I click OK, it's going to give me my readability statistics down here. Now notice it says there, because all it does is count the words, the characters, the paragraph, the sentences, and then it gives me my averages. Sentences per paragraph, 2.3. Okay, that's good. Words per sentence, 15.2. Okay. Characters per word, 4.8. And down here, here's my Flesch Kincaid grade level, 9.6. Okay, generally we want to be somewhere between 7 and 10, so that's just fine there. You don't want to go in and rigidly adhere to this if you've got things that are 17 words per sentence or 6 sentences per paragraph, but just use this as a guide to see how you're doing. Okay, let's go ahead and go back here, and now let's take a look at that active voice issue. When you turn on passive voice recognition, what it will do is when you run spell check, it will stop at every single sentence that is written in passive voice and point that out to you. So notice here it says passive voice, the report was written by me. Suggestions, I wrote the report. Here's the thing about passive voice. It is never wrong. Passive voice is not incorrect, but active voice is usually preferred, and let me show you why. Here's the situation. In active voice, the subject performs the action of the verb. In passive voice, the subject is acted upon. Let me repeat that. In active voice, the subject performs the action of the verb. In passive voice, the subject is acted upon. Okay, what does that mean? Let me give you a kind of a silly example, but it will really illustrate it. February 14. You know what day February 14 is? You go home, there's a big card on the table from your significant other. There's a big red heart on that card, and you know what's written on that big red heart. You are loved by me. I don't believe there's ever been a Valentine's Day card written that said, you are loved by me on it. They all say, I love you. You know, I think if you got a Valentine's Day card that said, you are loved by me, you'd feel a little less loved. And that is passive voice. What's the verb? Loved. Who's doing the loving? Me, but me's buried at the end of the sentence. This is the problem with passive voice. Passive voice is wordy and roundabout. Active voice, I love you, is more direct and impactful and to the point. Passive voice always takes more words than active voice. So active voice is usually preferred, but not 100% of the time. Sometimes we don't know who's performing the action. Sometimes the person being acted upon is more important. So passive voice is never wrong, and sometimes it's actually preferred. But you want to consciously make that decision, and that's why it's a great idea to turn on passive voice detection so that when you run spell check, it will stop at every passive voice sentence and ask you if you want to make a change there. If you haven't already done so, go ahead and download the active voice exercise from the online workbook. Or again, you can just pause as you go along throughout the exercise here. But let's go ahead and do those 10 exercises, those 10 sentences. And notice I'll blow this up. There's our instructions. Change any sentences that are written in passive voice into active voice. So remember, you don't have to change all of them. And it's not that they're wrong if they're in passive voice. It's just that active voice is usually preferred. Okay, here we go. Number 1, the report was prepared by the assistant. The assistant prepared the report. Number 2, the assembly line should be modified by the plant engineer. The plant engineer should modify the assembly line. All offers were rejected by me because of the company's lack of profitability. I rejected all offers because the company wasn't profitable. The jet should be cleaned by the crew before it is boarded. This one's a little bit tricky because there's actually 2 parts to it. The crew should clean the jet before passengers board. In the second part of that, before it is boarded, it refers to the jet. The jet's not going to board itself. Who's going to board the jet? The passengers. So we put those in there. The crew should clean the jet before passengers board. 5, the textbook was thought to be too expensive. We don't know who thought it. But if we make an assumption, we could say the students thought the textbook was too expensive. Number 6, the manager recorded the credit marks in the ledger. That is in active voice. 7, I like the new video game, but it is not compatible with my system. That is active. Number 8, the accounting statements were audited by the firm, and they were found to be accurate. 2 parts of this as well. The firm audited the accounting statements and found them to be accurate. Number 9, the union objected to the first pay proposal. That is active voice. And 10, the exercise was disliked because it was boring. The participants disliked the boring exercise. Well, I hope it wasn't too boring. Just wanted to get you kind of thinking about the difference between active voice and passive voice. Again, remember, passive voice is never wrong, and sometimes you will want to use it. President Reagan was shot. That is passive voice, but that's better than John Hinckley shot President Reagan. Notice I didn't even put Hinckley in the first sentence there. Sometimes you don't know who's doing the action of the verb, and you don't want to change it. But do always make that choice of active versus passive consciously. And that's why it's a good idea to turn on the passive voice detection tool in spell-check. That will do it with this module. In our next, we're going to get into editing with an eye towards correctness, right and wrong.